All right, everyone. Huge movie fanatic Nate stopping on by. Once again, joined by Matt, the guy I started this channel with all those years ago. He also has his own YouTube channel he started about 3 years ago. You can find it on YouTube by typing State of Flux. And if you type 3938, you might find the channel much easier. Now we're doing another one of our famed phone discussions. This time we're stopping on by to talk about the recent Halloween trilogy and our thoughts on it. Who would you like to start the discussion this time, Matt?
You can go first.
All right, sounds good. So we've got 20, the year is 2018, and just like with 20 years after the first film, 40 years after the original film, they do another sequel to Halloween, ignoring everything, unlike H2O, which actually did, I think it did, it took place after Halloween 2, if I'm remembering correctly. This
Yeah, that one was a direct sequel to Halloween 2, ignoring 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right, in this one we've got ignoring everything but the first film. I thought the idea was kind of interesting at the time. Honestly, it's been so long I can't even remember what I thought of the film when the trailers were rolling out before I saw it and stuff like that. At the time, I mean, getting on in years and being 2018 is just like, okay, well, horror these days, whatever, shot digitally, whatever. I don't think I had a lot of high hopes for it. One of the things I was most excited about was the rumor that John Carpenter was coming back to do the music for it was honestly at the time the thing that excited me the most. So cutting to actually seeing it, um, at the time I can't remember. I don't think about Halloween movies very often, not anything like Friday the 13th. I'm sure I've got a ranking if I can, if I really thought about it. But at the time, and still now, I mean, I regard Halloween 2018 as being something that is more or less kind of okay in some aspects and kind of not okay in other aspects. One of my biggest complaints is how Laurie Strode has turned into like Sarah Connor. I really much liked her character much more in H2O, where she was a normal woman getting on with her life, but she still had obviously the trauma of what she had dealt with in that film 20 years prior. I much would rather have had Laurie Strode be like that in this film instead of like Sarah Connor just waiting for, almost hoping for Michael to appear so she can do what she does to him at the end of the movie. I thought was lame. And having yeah, I mean, the one thing I like most about the movie, I guess, is the John Carpenter music, and I do feel like Michael as the character, and I want to say it's James Jude Courtney or whoever plays Michael in these three films. I thought the way Michael was portrayed in this film was very spot on to like the original couple films of Michael's portrayal, and that was the thing along with the John Carpenter back for the music that I thought was really cool. But I didn't appreciate like the some of the writers were guys who are known for like I don't know Seth Rogen comedy stuff, and some of the comedy that was worked into the movie I felt like it was forced and not necessarily should have been there. It was kind of annoying or whatever, and I really rolled my eyes when they had that one like psychiatrist guy who Laurie calls the new Loomis. He's got his own agenda to. I can't even remember what the hell he did. He's like studying Michael and wanted him to kill or whatever the hell he wanted to do, and he's the one who kind of points Michael, if memory serves, to Laurie's house towards the end. And yeah, like the first, I don't know, maybe the idea of it or the first half or whatever was kind of cool, but I think as the movie wore on, I'm just kind of like, okay, well, yeah, the main thing was just how they handled Laurie and just had her be a completely destroyed character, pretty much living for and hoping for this frickin' reunited with Michael. And yeah, I mean, I guess the end could never really live up to the hype, so the end really didn't impress me, and I guess you can take it from there, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm similar. Like for me, my big horror franchise has never been Halloween. However, I do like Halloween, but I think it's the lesser of the bunch. I'm not a fan of the Friday the 13th. That's where you and I splinter a bit. But um, I've always been driven more by Scream and Freddy. Uh, those are my slasher icons. Um, but I like most of the Halloween movies enough. So when I heard they were going to bring it back to the very first one, I was like, that's intriguing. I was like, they kind of already did that with H2O, but I guess they're going all the way back this time. And I'm like, all right. The one thing that's radically different between Halloween and Halloween 2 is that Michael's a stalker in the first movie. He's a voyeur. The first time we meet Michael is through his eyes. We don't actually meet him. We spend 8 minutes inside of him, watching other people, stalking other people. Then he commits this violent act, and that's when we first actually get to physically see him, and it's this little boy. And then the first movie does this brilliant thing where it tells but doesn't show for most of the movie. It does the opposite of what they teach you in screenwriting, where you just have the Dr. Loomis character just being like, this boy is insane. He's the devil in his eyes and all this kind of stuff. And he's constantly telling you what a threat he is, yet you're never seeing it. You keep seeing Michael watching people, but you never see what he's doing or what he's going to do. And that's what made that first one so scary, is the threat of when he's going to unleash. And when he does, is effective, and it's effective without any gore. And that's really powerful because it was powerful filmmaking. The second one, the first like 15 minutes, he's stalking people and doesn't kill that woman that he gets the knife from, but he goes next door and kills the other babysitter or whatever. That like he's still kind of stalking them, but then by like the 20-minute mark, he's just slaughtering every single person he comes in contact with. And that just didn't feel like the same character established in the first movie. He's never watching, he's just killing. And so I was like, when this one was announced and they were going all the way back, and I'm like, this will be great. We're actually going to get a movie that understands Michael as a like voyeuristic threat, and that's going to make the movie unsettling and eerie because we know that he's going to kill people. This is a slasher film. We just don't know when he's going to do it. And so, cut to when the movie comes out. The trailers look good. I get excited to see it. My wife is a big Michael Myers fan. That is her horror franchise, and she gave the movie about an hour and a half. It's like 2 hours or whatever. I can tell you the exact moment she dipped out. And I'll touch on that in a minute. But I was disappointed with the movie. Like, it's not bad. It's okay. But for stripping it all the way back to the beginning, they misunderstand Michael by having him never be the stalker. He is literally killing every single time you see him, not unlike the Rob Zombie movies, or like Halloween 2. I thought that the plot with Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode, was done better in Halloween H2O, but they also use the same story. She's also an alcoholic that also thinks that Michael is going to always be out there, and everybody in her life, including her offspring, are saying you just need to get over your trauma and live. But she is always knowledgeable and prepared that he could be coming, and she has great survival instinct. This, you're not wrong. They do very much Sarah Connor her with that, which didn't bother me so much, but I do feel like after 40 years, you'd probably let your guard down a lot more, because that would mean that Homeboy is going to be 60 or 70. But then you have like this weird off-putting comedy with like the I got peanut butter on my penis. Like, why is that line in there? That was a dumbass line. And I don't know. It just, like, for stripping it all the way back, it felt like they wanted to do Halloween 2 again, just not make her the sister, which I agree is the worst element ever introduced in the Halloween franchise. Maybe not. Like I guess the Shamrock like cult is also pretty stupid. But like I never was a fan of Michael and Laurie's sister kind of thing. I didn't that never really resonated for me. Um, so that's the only thing this movie does is it brings you all the way back to the second one to make the exact same mistakes as the second one while using the base premise of the seventh movie, which is a movie I actually like. Um, Halloween H2O, I would say, is definitely a better movie than this. Michael doesn't look as good, but you know what Michael does in that movie? He stalks people. He doesn't kill anybody for the first, like, he kills the two kids in the opening and the Dr. Loomis's secretary, but then he doesn't kill anybody again for 50 minutes. It's almost a whole other hour where he's just walking around and stalking people and learning and understanding what they do and how they move, and then he attacks, just like in the first movie. That movie got Michael better than Halloween 2018. The thing I did like is the last 20 minutes are really effective, and the whole trick or treat moment of like the daughter thinking she's completely scared and whatnot, and Michael coming for her, and then her being like, "Gotcha," and bang, shooting him down was pretty cool. And I like that they lit him on fire, and that she became Laurie Strode became his Michael Myers. They started shooting her and photographing her like Michael was photographed in the first movie. Anytime Michael was in the frame with her, she was the physical threat, and he was more of the prey, of the unknowing prey. And I liked that. And then you had the epic final shot of Michael burning in the basement, and like the ending worked for me enough to make the movie like okay. That's my Halloween 2018 rant.
Well, there you go. One thing I thought was cool that I'm surprised it took them this many movies to do, which I thought the little touch was really cool when the one cop or some guy's head was cut off and he like carved it like a pumpkin and shined the light in the neck hole. I thought that was
That's a great moment. However, it's also like I can't believe that Michael would have done that. Like the reality. This movie is trying to be sold as reality to some respect, and I'm like, I can't buy that. Um, so I didn't touch on my last bit of rant is where my wife lost the movie. Now I'm going to spoil the shit out of another like intellectual property. So spoilers if you don't want the book Psycho 2 to get spoiled. But I'm about to spoil the book Psycho 2 if you're comfortable with that.
I'm very comfortable, and if anyone listening isn't, feel free to whatever stop or fast forward or who knows what.
Yeah. Okay. So, spoilers for Psycho 2. Psycho 2 is about Norman Bates who escapes his like penitentiary or whatever, his asylum. He escapes, and then you follow one of the survivors of the first book, who is concerned about this, and you're following his doctor who's trying to get him back. And then you find out the big twist surprise at the end is that the psychiatrist that had been working on Norman the entire time uh, discovers that Norman, upon escaping, dies in a car crash. And Norman is dead, but the murders continued on. And it's because the psychiatrist who'd been working for, like, curing Norman became a dual personality and became Norman Bates. And so it was the big twist was that Norman wasn't the killer of Psycho 2, it was his doctor. Cut to this movie. We're sitting in the theater, opening night, watching the movie, and the Sam Loomis stand-in, this other doctor, I think his name is Tertain or something like that, suddenly kills the cop who is trying to stop Michael. And I'm like, oh my God, this literally takes essentially the same twist of Psycho 2 because he wants to experience what it is like to be like Michael, to take such life and stuff like that. And I just rolled my eyes, and my wife just got up and was like, "I'm gonna go to the bathroom." I'm like, "Want me to let you know what you missed?" And she's like, "No." And she came back like 15 minutes later with like nachos, and I was like, "You missed a lot." She's like, "I actually don't care." And I was like, "Wow, really?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm so done with this movie." And like all this stuff at the end, she was just like, she was like, they ruined it, and she thought this was for her the worst Halloween movie. She hated it, and it was because of that dumbass twist that she also read the book Psycho 2 and also had the same reaction to that book. Like, what a freaking letdown. So yeah, that's my last thoughts on this. Is it takes a weird twist from an obscure book, he reuses it in almost the exact same way, and it's still really fucking dumb. And it's also dumb that the sequel to Halloween is also called Halloween. I'll just point that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's three movies with the title Halloween. You pretty much just have to put the release year after them, almost make them a part of the title at this point. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, agreed. And I can understand why she was so disappointed by that, as I was, but I try not to let that completely ruin the movie. It's very difficult. I just try to pretend like it doesn't happen, and that's a deleted scene that they accidentally left in or something like that. But I'm assuming I don't know if do you have time to continue on to Halloween Kills?
yeah. Like we can finish the trilogy. Let's talk about Halloween Kills. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so there's aspects of Halloween 2018 that I liked, and aspects that I didn't. It was kind of a love-hate situation for Halloween 2018 with me, and when the trailers started to materialize, so after the success of Halloween 2018, then it was announced that there's going to be two more. There's going to be a trilogy, and I was
Yeah,
like, oh boy,
I was
okay.
like, this is dumb.
Yeah, so I'm like, oh boy. And, when the trailers, I don't know which ones showed it, but when the trailers arose, where it was kind of like we're seeing, the Michael slaughtering people outside the burning Laurie Strode house. I mean, that seemed kind of cool and stuff to me. And cutting to the movie, I think this is my favorite of the three recent Halloween films, and the reason why is because it's kind of goes back to, I mean, at this point we can pretty much forget any notion that we may have had, like you mentioned about, you were excited about a sequel to the first film, and maybe they were going to do more of the Michael from the first film kind of stuff. At this point, we know that's not what they're doing with this trilogy, so we just see kind of Michael slaughtering in this one night, which, ironically, I think we may have joked about this before. I don't know if it was you and I or me and someone else, but I mean, this movie at this point, I mean, it's so long that it's still supposed to be Halloween night. At some point, it's definitely got to be November 1st at some point.
Yeah, for
So
real, right?
this would be like Halloween. This one would be Halloween ends slash November 1st or whatever else you'd want to call it. Halloween ends into November 1st. But one aspect that I liked about this movie was I kind of like, I mean, I like it and don't like it at the same time, but mostly like it, which is the whole idea of going back to like doing some like, retconning of 1978 and showing this and that and the Myers house. And I think the Loomis thing would have been, the recasting briefly of Loomis worked until they did a close up on the guy. I was like, oh, why did they do a close up? Because I think it worked with the far shots of that guy. But I like the 78 aspect of this movie, and honestly, it would have been cool if there had been more. But my complaint about the 78 stuff is the reason for having the 78 stuff, which is just showing like the younger cop doing this thing where he's accidentally shot someone. It's like they don't, I haven't seen this one for a while, but it seems like they don't really even go anywhere with that guilt of like the cop now being older, having accidentally killed someone in 1978 or whatever the hell they were saying. But
Yeah,
I just enjoyed the aspect of them at least going back to 1978 and trying to make, the Myers house and trying to get the feel of that movie and the original mask and stuff like that. But so this is my favorite of the three recent ones. The one thing I hate is what's his name back. I was excited for this guy because obviously we know him from so many '80s films. The John Hughes films and stuff. It was cool to see.
Oh, the yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about.
It was
The
cool to
Danny,
yeah, it was
right?
cool. It was
Or
cool. Well,
Tommy?
Tommy Doyle. Yeah, I can't remember the
Tommy
guy.
Doyle.
I can't remember the guy who plays him, but
Anthony Michael Hall.
there you go, Anthony Michael Hall. It was cool to see him back, but then he's like so old, it's like maybe not so cool. But the character of that he portrays of the Tommy Doyle, I thought was this one of the most probably the most annoying character in the whole trilogy for me. And I was just like every time he was on screen, I was just like it got so old, and I absolutely just despise the little plot point of the people mistaking this other escaped inmate who I guess survived on the bus, who didn't die when the bus crashed. He waddled off it or wandered off it, and he's a mental patient, and he gets mistaken for Michael. And there's this big frickin' crowd that leads to his accidental death or whatever, falling from the building. I mean, that scene is like, oh my god, talk about cutting room floor material. That scene was freaking annoying. Tommy Doyle is annoying. They made such a big deal about the actual woman who played Lindsay Wallace returning, in this movie, but she doesn't really have much of a role in either of Halloween Kills or Ends, even though she's in both of them. Same thing with like the nurse from the first film. Once again, I don't think she's in 2018, but she's in this one again, and
Yeah,
it's like kind of cool, but I mean they don't really do anything with her. And the aspect I did like about it was the Michael, the Myers house, and the quote unquote couple that's now living in it. And I don't know, I thought it was a lot of. It's funny because I don't know if this shows my age and getting on in years, but I mean I thought the violence was extremely gratuitous and like almost just like, I mean, even for me who's like a slasher film fan, it's just like god, the violence is a little much where Michael's just stabbing a
yeah,
dead corpse over and over, and I think he just puts multiple knives in the dead corpse. And
yeah.
Jamie Lee Curtis's participation in this film is like just laughable and kind of akin to what she did in the original Halloween 2. And I guess that'll pretty much do it. If you want to see basically Michael slaughtering people and kicking ass, this is the Halloween film for you.
Well, interesting. You and I have really different opinions while also having the same opinion, which I never would have thought. But this is also my favorite of the three movies. Um, I had already come to peace with the fact that this was not a direct sequel to the original Halloween, like in terms of tone or character, and that the Michael we were going to get is going to be the slaughterhouse kind of guy. And when I saw the first preview, I was like, oh god, literally, it's just more of that. And watching the movie, the worst aspect of the movie for me is the Michael Myers stuff. I thought the one time that it worked for me was when he was killing the guy by putting all the different knives into him, because that just reminded me of a little kid, and I'm like, oh, he still has the mentality of like a little kid playing with a toy and just trying to figure out how it works and stuff like that. So that was the one and only Michael Myers scene. I do agree it was like overly gratuitous and graphic throughout the entire film, but that part as well. So that was the one time I was fine with the Michael killing. Um, However, this movie has a lot of aspects that I really like. I'm all on board with the townspeople, and my favorite aspect of it was that scene in the hospital uh, where they kill the mistaken Michael. However, I understand, though, why that doesn't work. One of the other positives I want to mention is I agree with you, like firmly about the stuff set in 1978. That was amazing, and there should have been more of that. Because what this movie is trying to dissect is collective trauma, right? Like culturally shared trauma for, like on a mass level. You see this whenever there's like a mass shooting of some kind or a terrorist attack, and how people respond. You very much get the like meathead 9/11 kind of like let's go to war and take them down kind of mentality, and you get that with the Tommy Doyle character. I don't know that that needed to be Tommy Doyle, but I was fine enough with it. Um, and I liked that aspect. The only problem is that story only works if Michael isn't in it. Michael, if I were writing this, I would write very similar, but I would have had Michael remain dead in the fire pit at Laurie's house, and then have her get rescued or whatever and um, brought to the hospital, and her continuing to espouse that like if firefighters went, he's still out there, and have her be the one like kind of germinating this fear and letting it build and take over the entire town, where the town starts going after anybody wearing a mask. Like it's Halloween, they start thinking that everybody's Michael. And you could even have a couple of escaped convicts from that same bus get actually attacked under the collective fear of, is this Michael? Well, let's just fuck him up to make sure. And that is the most haunting aspect of the movie itself, but that tells an interesting story of how we like try to immediately after a traumatic event deal with it and deal with our rage and our emotions and our want to know why and all this kind of stuff. There's a really compelling story there, and I think that's probably the movie that David Gordon Green wanted to make, and the studio was like, no, it's got to have Michael though. And so he's like, all right, you want Michael? I'll give you Michael. He'll be all up in this movie. And this movie, it's weird how Halloween 2018 reflects the first movie in that it's essentially the same story of Michael of trying to get to Laurie, and then Laurie beating him at the end, and right down to a lot of the same shots that's done by choice. And this one, too, reflects Halloween 2 in that you have a much more viscerally violent Michael than you got in the previous movie. He's way more over the top in this one. You have Laurie confined to a bed for most of the movie, and it's just very similar to Halloween 2 in that respect as well. But for me, this is my favorite of the newer ones. I kind of like just fast forward whenever we have a Michael scene. I love the stuff in 1978. If you'd included more of that and seen how the fear of that Michael inspired in that first movie, after we saw the end of it, and continue it on with the night in flashbacks as this movie does, but do many more of them and see how it starts spiraling out into the town, like, and then have that reflect how it's happening again in the modern day. That's a much better movie. And that way you can also get more of your Michael in it, because he's there in all the flashback scenes. And in the back of your head, you're going to be like, is he really dead in the basement? Or did he get out? Because we don't know. Like, that's how I would have done it. But as is, it's fine enough, I guess. So there you have it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea, and it's almost kind of what they touched on with Halloween Ends a little bit at the beginning. Like if you'd done that with Halloween Kills, by not knowing if Michael escaped or not, and then you'd have people that die maybe accidentally or maybe if they're robbed, and then throughout the course of the movie you could be like, these accidents or robberies or whatever they are. I mean, this guy was stabbed and robbed, or was he robbed or wasn't he robbed? Was this Michael who did it? Was it not? That would have been kind of interesting. And like you say, if you keep doing throughout the movie flashbacks to possibly 78, seeing the real Michael or whatever, that would be your way of actually having Michael while also exploring this idea in the present day of not Michael terrorizing the town, but the idea of Michael terrorizing the
Yeah,
town.
right? Like, that's a much, and that's what the, like, Jamie Lee's soliloquy at the end of the movie is saying just that. Like, that's the curse of Michael Myers, is he inspires doubt that he is ever truly gone. And like that's what the movie is trying to say. but then it tries to have its cake and eat it too by having Michael in the movie just slaughtering everybody, including the daughter at the end of the movie. She has that excellent like gotcha moment um, where I was like, oh, we're doing that again, and that kind of worked for me a second time. But then he slaughters her like minutes later. Um, Sidebar: I don't know if you remember, but way back in the day when I used to make short films, I made my two like Helmet Zephyr movies. Um, the second of which ends with uh, Helmet Zephyr stuck in a basement, surrounded by all of his victims who have been brought back to life, all of whom are carrying weapons, and just beat the absolute shit out of Helmet Zephyr until he dies. And when this movie happened, and that's essentially the same ending this one had, I was like, oh my god, I did this 10 years ago. So yeah.
Yeah, that's always funny. I think that happened with me as well. You know, I've done so many shorts and things over the years that I think I've had that experience too. Like, we did a short as teenagers that turned out to be very similar to what Last Action Hero ended up being, like the whole plot. And I'm like, Jesus Christ! I mean, that was just crazy. So
Yeah.
it is funny when that stuff happens. Like, you know, we did this, and that's crazy. That's a funny little anecdote.
Yeah.
I
Um,
was gonna, oh, before we move on, I was gonna ask if you'd seen the extended version of Halloween Kills.
I have not. No, I have not.
Okay, that's got an extra, I can't remember what it is. I don't think it amounts to much, but it's an extra little bit of a scene in the 1978 era where I think Michael is like possibly behind a bush or something like that. It's not an extra kill, but an extra little bit with Michael stalking, if my memory serves. So that's kind of cool that the extended version on Blu-ray has a little bit more of the 1978 stuff.
Yeah, totally. Well, cool. All right. What are your thoughts on Halloween Ends?
Well, I can kind of tell by your laughing, asking the question. I probably have an idea what your thoughts on it are. I'm really conflicted about Halloween Ends, and we I talked about this back obviously when the movie came out for the channel and stuff. But now having a chance to reflect a little more, the way I guess the what I'll how I'll start this little bit is my talk about it is just by saying that it's my biggest problem with the movie is that it's the last film in this purported trilogy. Like if you had done like a Halloween offshoot film and have this be something that's not the last film in a trilogy, I would have enjoyed it much more. And I do actually like it for what it is. And the reason why is because unlike so many movies these days, especially horror movies or slasher films, the movies don't really surprise me very much anymore, and they're usually very predictable and like, oh, okay, I knew that was coming. So the one thing I respected about Halloween Ends was just that it took a completely left hand, just completely different twist and turn and just did something completely unexpected. But like I say, I think that's incompetent to do in the last movie of a trilogy when you've done nothing like this in the two films prior. My idea is if you're going to make it a part of a trilogy, have this somehow be the second film, and maybe the third film you can wind it up and have some kind of a conclusion with that. So I like what they did with Halloween Ends because it's very, like I say, in a perfect world, this movie would have been some Halloween offshoot very much again like with Hobbs and Shaw and Fast and the Furious series, have it be some offshoot and not a part of a trilogy. But alas, I think its biggest mistake is that it is a part of a trilogy, and that's very sloppy in that regard. But having said that, I mean, I don't like everything about it. I think the ending with Laurie Strode and is very anticlimactic to say the least, and all that, this and that, and but I do appreciate, I guess, the just different way, the differentness that it does. But like I say, having it be a part of this trilogy and introducing a new character in the third film to do this goofy story is I thought was goofy. So I'm very interested to hear what your thoughts are.
Yet again, you and I are kind of in agreement, but also not. It's very I too thought that it was a very unique idea to not have Michael be the main villain for at least most of the movie. Um, and I think that this would have worked again if you had made Michael remain dead in the first one. Uh, I like the whole idea of we manufacture our own boogeyman. There's always going to be a Michael Myers because we, like society, needs to make a Michael Myers, even if somebody isn't necessarily deserving of it. But being called it enough, being called a boogeyman enough, you will eventually live up to that title and just snap and be the boogeyman. And like, it's actually saying something really interesting. And for 45 minutes of this movie, I really dug it. And my wife did too. She hated the first one. The second one, she couldn't stand at all. She hated that movie even more. For this one, she went with it up until we meet Michael. And the scene where she meets Michael, she was like, all right, I'm going to bed. This one we watched, this is the first one I didn't watch in theaters. I watched this one through Peacock or whatever. And she just went to bed, and then in the morning she was like, what happened? And so I told her. But I, similarly, was going with the movie up until that scene where, like, they lock eyes, and then suddenly he actualizes to being the new Michael. And then he's kind of like Michael's apprentice throughout the back half of the film. And then Laurie, who's been so understanding through most of the movie, suddenly is just like, that man has boogeyman eyes, and I know he's insane. We must stop him. And she's ready to, like, kill him and whatnot. And I'm like, oh my God, this shit the bed so bad. Because they had a good thing going, and they just ruined it. As I was watching, I was like, this could be a much better version of of Friday the 13th Part 5, which is a movie that I don't dislike. I think that's one of the better Friday the 13th movies, because they did something a little different. And I was on board with that. And I thought that they were going to actually do a deep dive character study version of that movie. And I was like all for it. And it worked until Michael's there. And then all the scenes with Michael are just ridiculous and awful. Especially once they just get rid of this guy, kill him dead, and then Michael and Laurie have the slappiest fight in the kitchen where it's like, he throws her against a fridge, she throws him against the island, but he turns and throws her against the island, so she throws him against the fridge. And I was just like, this is what it came down to. We had this epic showdown in the first movie, and now this, like, they're just slapping each other in, like, the dining room almost.
Pinball in the kitchen.
Yeah, basically. And then I like how she essentially crucifies him onto the thing, and like they create that little parade of killing Michael, and they throw him into like the chomper, and he gets his like body just popped like a pimple, which made me laugh out loud. But like I was just so disappointed with the end game of this movie, especially since it is the end game of this story. And my favorite part is that Laurie is writing the book. My favorite part of it being awful is that Laurie's writing this book, and it ends with, and so I'm going to let that man die in anonymity. And I'm like, you literally just wrote an entire book about him, so you clearly didn't let him die in anonymity. That made me laugh. But yeah, and then they had the whole subplot with the granddaughter, who I thought was a highlight of both the first and second movies. And then this one was just like, so, like, she was such a, like, strong character until she was in a scene where she needed to not be a strong character and have the guy come in and be like, you know, you shouldn't let your boss talk to you like that. And, like, suddenly she's very, like, meek and subservient, and I'm like, well, she can't be both. Is she a strong, forceful character that is going to confront problems, or is she a meek character who's afraid of confrontation? And it happens twice in the movie. like where suddenly she just becomes meek, and I don't know, that rubbed me the wrong way. Um, but yeah, I just was really let down because they had a good thing going and they just absolutely ruined it. But similar to Halloween 3, this is a movie that really isn't about Michael. It's a sort of an anthology piece, kind of like you pointed out. And so I thought it was kind of neat how these movies reflect the original trilogy for this new trilogy. Um, and that was kind of neat for me. But yeah, I just wasn't a fan of how they executed this genuinely good idea. It works if Michael remains dead, and I think you have a compelling trilogy if you do so, where Michael's an actual threat but dies at the end. Pardon me. Then you have a second one where the fear of Michael being out there gets everybody stir crazy and like wanting to fight back against that which they can't anymore. And then you have this one where society is always going to create its own boogeyman. Like those three stories work only if Michael dies. And I also think it's weird that they created this character because clearly, clearly the trajectory of that first movie, the granddaughter was probably supposed to be the killer for this one. It ends with that weird shot of her holding the knife, and you're like, is this movie saying she's going to lose it? And I feel like that was probably the plan for this movie when they pitched it to the studio, because supposedly they pitched the two sequels, and those got greenlit after the success of the first one. My guess was that was the pitch, was that she was going to be the killer of this one and make good on the promise of Halloween 4 and 5. Halloween 4 ends very similarly, where you have the, was it Jamie character, try to kill the mom, and you think she's going to be the new Michael. And I think that's what the plan for this movie probably was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if we forgot to mention that when we talked about the first couple, but yeah, the end of the 2018 film was like pans down to her holding the bloody knife, and it's like, uh-oh, Jamie Lloyd all over again.
Yeah, totally.
Well, yeah,
Um,
very
yeah.
cool. I'm sorry, did you have more?
No, that was it.
Yeah, it is too bad about Halloween Ends and how it did start, relatively strong and like halfway through, like you say, supportive Laurie is now unsupportive, and I think I want to say the Allison character, the granddaughter, does like
Yeah,
a U-turn as well, and it's just like it almost becomes like a completely different movie halfway or two-thirds of the way through, and it's a bummer, but I still do like it for being very different and taking a chance. But again, why are you going to take this risky chance or do this thing at the end of a trilogy? It doesn't make any sense. It kind of, these three films kind of feel like the sequel trilogy to Star Wars, where it's kind of like you've got one person doing the first one, someone else second, and then the person back to do the third one again. But I mean, they're all done by the same director, so
yes, they have the same writers and same directors for all three of them. I feel like studio meddling was what brought Michael into both the second and the third one. Like, I would not be shocked if we find out, like, in a tell-all book 5, 10 years from now, some like horror fan writes a book on the Halloween franchise and interviews David Gordon Green, and he's like, our pitch was Halloween as it was, and then Halloween Kills was without Michael, and then the third one was going to be about the granddaughter becoming the new boogeyman. And like, I'm pretty confident that that was the movies he wanted to make, and the studio was like, we can't make a movie without Michael because the one time we did, it was bad, or like poorly received.
yeah, poorly received is a better way to say it. But and I was just sitting here thinking about the posters for these three films and how boring and similar they are. Like the posters for these three films are all just a shot of Michael Mask. It's like, wow, that's original.
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, and like one of the things that everybody like complained about with the Rob Zombie movies was how incredibly grossly violent they were. And like these three movies don't have any ounce of originality to them, really. Like the first movie, the one original idea comes from that Psycho 2 book. Um, and then this one has like the original idea of like maybe Michael isn't the killer. Let's bring somebody else to be the killer, with it right from Friday the 13th 5. Um, but then like the mask is all cracked and aged, just like in the Rob Zombie Halloween. You have Laurie going through almost the exact same um, storyline from H2O, like in these movies. She's rehabilitated herself in this movie, but like I don't know, like it just feels like these are all best of clip shows of what you've seen before. And like at a certain point, even a best of clip show is just a clip show, and it's usually pretty skippable.
Well, that's true. And what were your thoughts on the fact that it's very ironic that after 40 years of having nothing happen, still 40 years later, Jamie, Laurie was so Sarah Connor-ish and ready for battle, but then like 4 years after he actually does show up and terrorize her, to terrorize her and the town or whatever and her loved ones and stuff, and it's like 4 years later, even though she's not 100% sure if he's dead or not, she seems to have moved on. I thought that was kind of really goofy. Like, I,
It, yeah, I I agree. There is one line in the second movie that kind of supports why she would get on, which is she thought she was the target the whole time, right? That
oh, yeah.
her, and then finding out that no, he just wanted to go back home, and discovered that she was just in his path of destruction, and her friend's death and her attack was all meaningless, and the fear of him has been for nothing because he doesn't care about her. He just wants to go home. So that's probably why she feels comfortable enough. But at the same time, it also, like, even if she's comfortable enough to just move on with her life and become rehabilitated on some level, you'd think the survivalist that she became for 40 years would have also been like, just in case, and then like rig her house to make it Michael proof, just because she knows he actually is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that begs a question that I haven't, I think I've seen this twice. I can't remember. I haven't seen it for a while, but it begs the question, why the hell does he show up at her place at the end of Halloween Ends anyway? Do we know?
He because he was following the kid, and the kid I think was the new killer. I can't remember. Corey, is that his name?
Yeah, I want to say it's
Uh,
Corey.
uh, he was following Corey, and Corey went there to eliminate her because he felt that she was the thing standing in the way of him being with the granddaughter.
Oh,
So
okay.
it just, again, he happened upon her in a just as meaningless of a way. But since he was there, he's like, I'm going to kill her. Um,
As long as I'm here. Oh my God.
yeah. So I don't know. But, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, that's, I think, what is ultimately disappointing with these three movies is, like, unlike most slasher films of their type, these movies did have thoughts and they wanted to say something with all three of them, and then they fell apart in the process because they adhered to the horror movie or slasher movie genre rules rather than tried to do anything unique and break them like Scream did all those years ago. And that's what's disappointing.
Yeah, darn movie studios anyway. I mean, if the idea ever was, which it very well might have been, to do something original as we might, as we hypothesize, it could have been with this trilogy. It was definitely probably the studio that got in the way of that.
Yeah, and like it would have made the Halloween franchise what John Carpenter always supposedly wanted it to be, which was an anthology. You would have had your sequel with Michael, but then you would have had two movies where Michael very much is a presence in like name only, but essentially they're anthology films where you have a town convinced Michael is out there, and then you have a town that created a new boogeyman. And if memory serves, the original script for the fourth Halloween movie was pretty similar to what Halloween Ends is. It followed Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace um, trying to stop the spirit of Michael from taking over the town 10 years later. That was the original plan for the fourth one, as scripted by the guy who did the third. The I think the script was written by the guy who wrote the novelizations of the second and third book. He wrote the first draft screenplay for Halloween 4: Return of Michael Myers, which ended up not getting used.
That's a
But
bummer. Yeah, the Halloween 4 ends up being pretty much a carbon copy of the first film.
yeah, so
Well, there,
anyway,
that's huge
yeah,
movie fanatic Nate and Matt's and thoughts on, I guess, the recent Halloween trilogy.
yeah. Um, Curious to hear your thoughts on Scream and the new one coming back to it, because I think the very first day we ever recorded anything back in 2011, we talked about Scream, which had just come out, Scream 4. So I'm curious to see what you have to say about 4, 5, and 6, because I'm assuming I know at one point you rewatched 4 and came down against it. I'm wondering if the passing of Wes, knowing it's his final movie, altered your thoughts, and then curious to see what you have to say about 5 and 6 at some point here in the future.
Oh, okay. So, you'd like to hear my thoughts on 4 to see if they've changed. Well, then I'll have to rewatch 4 as well as 5 then, which is no problem. I'm always up for a scream.
Yeah,
Well, very cool. Maybe we'll make that our next discussion whenever is convenient for you. Obviously, I've got a little bit of homework, a couple of movies to rewatch, but screams are always fun, so that's not a problem. And I'm, looking forward to seeing the fifth one again anyway, since I think I only saw it once. So,
that's weird. I think I've seen it about 5 times, and it's only a year old. But
which might
I'm a fan of the whole franchise. I've seen them all like a dozen times.
which is probably an indicator on your thoughts on it, I would say.
I mean, maybe we'll see. I'll just tease that.
Just tease that, but I guess that'll do it for this video. I'm assuming we're also going to part ways here on the old Telephono Rooney.
Yep, yep. Right on. Well, thank you for having me on and once more, and I look forward to doing this again in a couple weeks' time. I think that new one comes out just a little over a week here. So, but yeah, very cool. Thanks for having me.
You bet, Matt. Thanks for stopping on by again, and we'll definitely be talking to you in the future.
Yeah, take care.
Take care, Matt.
Bye.
Bye.